Good afternoon, ragamuffins. I hope that's what you like to be called. Otherwise, let me know and I'll call you something else. Welcome to the channel. My name is Dean. I am a historical fiend. I am an artist, and I would love to share a little bit of the antebellum period with you whenever you're watching this. Um, so a little bit on me. I am currently finishing my undergrad, and then I plan to get my master's in history with a focus on the US antebellum period. The antebellum period is basically the time after the Revolutionary War, but before the Civil War. Antebellum means before the war. So it's before the Civil War, and I feel like it's a really glazed over kind of period of American history, especially in public schooling, because it's kind of the revolution ends and then it's, hey, we're handing you this new country, have fun, hope you make it work, and kind of people trying to make it work, and there's, a giant elephant in the room, slavery, and just people trying to deal with it, trying to maybe slap a band-aid on it or get rid of it, or it changes over time, but we'll be focusing on kind of the early antebellum period, and I will be trying to provide some good context and a fun story about one of the goofiest duels I've kind of ever heard of. Well, I just find it entertaining, but a really funny duel between Henry Clay and John Randolph of Roanoke. So, a little bit of context. I'm sure that you know about the Revolutionary period. Britain, we're gonna be free. We're not gonna listen to you anymore, says America. Then you got, Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, John Adams, James Madison, Hamilton, Monroe. You've got all of the founders being like, yo, we've got to beat Britain. And they do, they succeed. So we have our war with Britain, and now we're free. And we have our first three presidents: George Washington, we have John Adams, and then we have Thomas Jefferson. Louisiana Purchase, embargo. Britain and France are fighting again. So, fast forward to James Madison. Madison, he's kind of got a hot potato. Things with Britain are not going so well. Britain is, kind of blockading the trade. They're taking American sailors and turning them into, like, they're basically forcing them to work with the British Navy, and they're encroaching on our freedom, yo. We can't have that. This is America, dude. So this is where we're going to see kind of two groups emerge in the antebellum period. We've got the people who don't want the war and the people who do want another war with Britain, coined war hawks. So, probably the most notable war hawk is Henry Clay. Ignore the quality of these printouts. Okay, we are not made of money. That's okay. In this economy, oh, nice printouts. That's really tough. But we've got Henry Clay, the great compromiser, Kentucky representative, and he has some beef with Britain. So, he was born in 1777, and his home was raided by the British when he was but a wee lad, and his dad also died in the same year. So, he did not have positive associations with Britain. He was also an enslaver by 2 years old. So, don't feel too bad for him. He What's really funny about the Clay mythos that he especially made for himself was like, and I was just like a poor orphan, and I had no education, no money, no father. And it's like, okay, but you were still like pretty rich. So we have Henry Clay, and he is Virginia born. He's a Kentucky lawyer, and he's super personable, super charismatic. People love him, and he's like, "Yo, send me to the government so I can get this war with Britain cooking." Okay, okay. So then we've got our second main war hawk and second member of the Great Triumvirate. If you don't know what the Great Triumvirate is, it is the political trio of Daniel Webster, Henry Clay, and John C. Calhoun. And it's really interesting because they kind of represent the kind of regional kind of areas. Daniel Webster for the north, Calhoun for the south, and Clay for the west. So then we have Calhoun. He was also a war hawk, South Carolinian. um, he sows the rhetorical groundwork for the Confederacy, strengthened nullification, and advocated for Southern secession. And I think something that really sums up a bit of him is when we look at Thomas Jefferson saying all men are created equal, Calhoun was like, actually, I don't think so. I don't think all men are created equal. So that's just a taste of him. He's the first senator to say that slavery was a positive good. So just keep that in the back of your noggin. But that's way down the line. This is them young. So we've got Henry Clay and we've got Calhoun, and they are our war hawks. Then we've got our anti-war people like Daniel Webster. He was a Massachusetts lawyer born in New Hampshire. He did a few Supreme Court cases. I read a book about another criminal court case that he did. The beginning was so good, and then it was just so dry by the end. I'll have to do a review on that, but it was kind of disappointing. And then we have our other main kind of character in this story, John Randolph of Roanoke. He was a Virginia law not a Virginia lawyer. He was a Virginia representative, part of the Randolph family, which were super mega big in Virginia, like first settlers in Virginia type legacy. He also claimed to be a descendant of Pocahontas. Ugh. Yeah. And we have other side characters. Well, it's kind of hard to call them side characters, but they're not so relevant to the duel between Clay and Randolph, which we're getting to. I promise it's all related. And then we have John Quincy Adams, the son of John Adams, and he was also anti-war hawk. I'd have to double check that, but we've got our war hawks and we've got our anti-war hawks. And anti-war hawks are like, we can't afford a war. Plus, if we have a war with Britain, it's going to make life over here way harder. But we have the war hawks like Clay and Calhoun. They go to the war hawk mess, and because politicians lived in boarding houses at the time, where so you would have just basically a bunch of roommates, and they would kind of form little cliques and they would do things together. So part of the war mess, they would go to events together or not go to events together to kind of strengthen their power. And they're like, Madison, please, James Madison, we need this war with Britain. If we don't have this war, what was it all for, Mr. Madison? What was it all for? So Madison, he's like, okay, let's do this whole war with Britain thing. So that is how we get the War of 1812. Very short and reductionist summary of that, but basically that's how we get to the War of 1812. So we have our war with Britain. We're taking names in the West. But we leave kind of the South undefended, like kind of the East undefended, and that is how we get the White House burning down. Oopsie daisy. Epic party foul, Britain. Not cool. So, the war, it goes on for a while. There's a lot of like military mishaps, and there's tons and tons of books on the War of 1812. But, from the War of 1812, we have the Battle of New Orleans, and that's how we get the kind of creation of war hero Andrew Jackson. And if I don't want to show you the $20 bill version of him, because this is what he actually looked like in Trail of Tears and Expansion of Slavery. We do not like Andrew Jackson over here. So the war is over. We have John Quincy Adams and Henry Clay. They go to the Treaty of Ghent before the war was over. And there's a really funny story from this other guy who was also there, where this other guy's son was like, dude, Clay and Adams are always fighting. Like, they are always beefing like crazy. It's like they hate each other. That's going to make the corrupt bargain really funny. So, the war is over. And now we've won our second war of independence against Britain. And we're in the Monroe administration now. And James Monroe, he's like, yo, I need a secretary of the War Department. Clay, do you want it? Clay's like, I'll pass. Monroe goes to, I believe, like 4 other guys before it lands on Calhoun. And Calhoun is like, heck yeah, I'll be part of the War Department. Hot diggity dog, I've got plans. So, he starts whipping it into shape. He has this ambitious plan for forts in the West because, we've got like other European powers over there, but we also have the indigenous peoples over there, and oh no, they're threatening us, But so Calhoun is like, yo, I've got this plan for these forts. It's gonna be bomb diggity. And, he's like, yo, Bestie Clay, who is Speaker of the House, he's like, Bestie Clay, what do you think of my fort plan? And Clay is like, we don't have the budget for that. Sorry, Pookie. Sorry, but it's a no-go. And Calhoun, he was like absolutely devastated. Like, the Clayhoun is a thing. People ship it. And, just kind of following these two politicians' timelines and their time as like friends and their time as enemies. It's very funny, very fanfic potential. Yeah, but on to the Clay Randolph duel. So we have Monroe presidency. We're getting to the end of it, and we enter the War of Giants. War of Giants, we've got this guy Crawford from Virginia running, John Quincy Adams running, Clay and Calhoun are running, and then Wild Horse, Black Horse. Yeah. Wait, is that? Yeah, the mystery just showed out of nowhere. Jackson shows up, and so they're all vying for the presidency. Clay, he's like, well, it doesn't look like I'm winning this time, so I don't know who's his support, but I'm keeping my eye on John Quincy Adams. Like, who is Jackson? How is he qualified? And Clay gave Jackson the nickname Military Tyrant, I believe. And yeah, like Clay, he's a Jackson hater. And he's like, bruh, we do not want the unqualified military guy. That's all I'm saying. And then you have Calhoun, and he was also running, but he's not caught like I don't think he was like crazy enough to be like president, like There's another book that's like how to fight presidents, and it's really, really funny. But like the introduction of it is basically like you have to be like wackadoodle to want to do this. And fair. But like Calhoun, he just doesn't have that like presidential riz. Like, sure, he's like super qualified and good at speaking, but he doesn't have that, you know, you want to go crazy for him kind of energy that like Clay brought or Jackson brought. So Calhoun, he's like, it looks like this isn't working out either. I'll be someone's VP. Yeah, I'll be vice president. That's cool. And so that's how he ends up being vice president for John Quincy Adams and Andrew Jackson. That's like a short way to go about that, but yeah, he's VP for both of them, which is kind of a funny flip flop. And then we have John Quincy Adams, and John Quincy Adams is like, hey Clay. Oh yeah, John Quincy Adams. Clay, I know that like we high key hate each other, but like, are you thinking what I'm thinking? And Clay is like, yeah, we cannot let Jackson win. So Clay and Adams, they team up, and because there was a tie, the tie goes to the Speaker of the House. Who's Speaker of the House? Henry Clay. So this is what historians call the corrupt bargain. And it was basically like, hey, Clay swung the vote towards Adams so that he could be Secretary of the State. That's like so sus. That's so like wild. That's so corrupt. Corrupt bargain. So people did not like this. And one of those people who was not like, whoa, that's a little much for me, was Calhoun. Clayhoun is already on the rocks right now. So Calhoun is like, yeah, we are not friends with Clay right now. Yeah, no, I do not support the corrupt bargain. And so we are in the Adams administration, and we finally reached the duel. um, so we have John Randolph of Roanoke. Almost every source I've read about this guy describes him as like the meanest person you know. Like he's just a bully. People are like, he's eccentric. He's eccentric to say the least. And I have my notes here. There's some really funny excerpts that kind of describe him. And like he was like super tall, super lanky, had a lot of health problems. There's some pretty humorous, well, not humorous. I'm sure that sucked, but like he had a lot of health problems, including like gastrointestinal problems. And as someone with gastrointestinal problems, I feel that, where he's like, oh, everything it hurts. I have diarrhea incessant. I have to pull up the letter sometime. Anyway, but Randolph, he's not a nice guy. He walks in and he looks at you and you're like, oh man, I hope he doesn't say anything about me. And he was just like a really big kind of bully. And the way that the historiography about this duel has been made is just as entertaining to me as like the duel itself. So we have all of our kind of characters in the House of Representatives. I don't know, but basically the job of the VP, who's VP right now, that's not him. John Quincy Adams is the president right now, and he is like literally beefing with John C. Calhoun, his vice president. Like they are not getting along, and they're actually like attacking each other in the press under these different pseudonyms where Like, according to this 1907 biography, the author asserts that, like, Calhoun did not believe that he had the right to interrupt a senator in debate or stop him from speaking forever or call him to order for anything improper which he might say. So that's literally the job of the vice president, but Calhoun is like, if he wants to talk, that's his freedom of speech, I'll let him talk. And it's like, but he's, like, insulting people's looks. Like, he's not even on topic. Like, you're not gonna step in for this? That's a little wild. And so Calhoun is letting Randolph, who one of my favorite nicknames for him is Gargoyle of Vituperation, which is basically he says mean things. The amount of words that I've learned that just mean he says mean things, just researching this guy, oh, hilarious. But he is always insulting, talking smack, throwing attacks, and he's like going super hard on Clay and Adams over the corrupt bargain, where it's like, I know what you did, and I'm not afraid to, like, insult you to your face or your mother. We're going after mothers now? Call him to order, people are telling Calhoun. Calhoun is like, no. So, John Quincy Adams, under the pen name Patrick Henry, is writing basically attacks in the press about, Vice President Calhoun. And Calhoun, he responds with a pen name Onslow. And they're basically just beefing through the press. So everything is already off to a very messy start. You've got the VP and the president beefing. Who's never heard of that? Calhoun Jackson. That comes after this. We won't be able to get to that. This is about the Clay Randolph duel, I promise. So, Randolph, he's talking smack all the time. And so he goes on like a 13-hour filibuster. Like, he is just saying unhinged things. And let me find some of it. But yeah, they're talking about Panama. Like, they're kind of debating, what do we do with Panama? Like, I mean, that's like a reductionist summary, but this is all started over a debate over Panama. And so Randolph, he starts saying some stuff. He starts rambling. If you've ever tried to read this guy's speeches, I'm so sorry. They are so confusing and incoherent and just full of, like, Latin references just because. Like, I mean, they're there and I understand what he's trying to do, but it just doesn't work so much. They're really, really hard to read. And I say this as someone who likes to read, like, old biographies for fun. Like, I be doing this for fun because I'm crazy like that. But his stuff, ugh, it makes my head hurt. But he's making another drunken speech in, like, 1825. And he's like, Adams and Clay, yeah, they're, quote, the coalition of Biffle and Black George. And then he goes on to say that they are, that he goes on to call John Quincy Adams a Puritan, which, I mean, that's where you have Massachusetts. They came from Puritan, so I mean, that one's not that bad. But he calls Henry Clay a blackleg. Bum, bum, bum. Now, a blackleg, that is a pickpocketer. That's a scammer. That's a liar. And there's one thing you don't call Henry Clay, a liar. Henry Clay, in his youth, got in a duel with this guy, Humphrey Marshall, because Humphrey Marshall was like, you're, like, super into Jefferson. like slavishly devoted to Jefferson. And Clay was like, so what if I am? Loser. And so Humphrey Marshall is like, okay, man, you're weird. And Clay is like, well, you're a coward. And so Marshall is like, well, you're a liar. Clay is like, you went too far with that one. We have to duel. He did not even have his own dueling pistol. But he's like, let me borrow my friends. Let's go across the Ohio River. Let's duel. Let's duel. And that's exactly what they did. First round, they fire, they miss. Second round, Clay's pistol gets stuck and Humphrey, like, I think shoots him in the leg. And Clay is like, I think Clay got shot in the leg at like round 3. But he was like, again, bruh. Let's go round 4. Let's go round 4. And Marshall, he's like, I'm sorry, dude. I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry, bro. The beef is settled. I don't want to die. You don't want to die, right? Right. So I have to pull out my book for referencing things. This is Heirs of the Founders, H.W. Brands. It's a good starting point. I would not say it's like the end-all be-all of triumvirate books, but it's definitely a good start. So Randolph, he is going on this like 12-hour drunken spiel. Guy was always drunk for the most part. He was like, he used a lot of substances, including opium, because he was like chronically ill for the most part, had a lot of pain. So yeah, that was called like the blue pill back then. A little side tangent. But, he's going on another drunken ramble, and everyone is like, oh my God, Calhoun, call this guy to order. He just keeps saying nothing. He's just like talking and talking and talking. And, there's a really funny way in which one historian describes it in particular that I found quite entertaining, where which guy is this? I have to pull it up on the Library of Congress. It's not pulling up. That's okay. But this historian describes this moment as, quote, Mr. Randolph's seat in the Senate during Mr. Clay's secretaryship gave him an opportunity to effect his object. How did he use it? By assailing Mr. C's personal character, by calling him a blackleg and stealing, in short, quote, a leaf from the curse book of pandemonium, end quote, to abuse and insult him. He knew that Mr. Clay was surrounded by his family. He knew that his every word, whether spoken in his sober or inebriated moments, was pregnant with death to the pride and happiness of the innocent and lovely. Although he himself had no family, although he was the individual in reference to whom a distinguished friend of ours once thanked God in Congress that monsters could not perpetuate their species, still he must have known from hearsay that the feelings of a wife and a daughter are keenly sensitive. Keenly sensitive. Had Mr. Clay had a seat in the Senate, Mr. Randolph, dark as were his designs, and much as he longed for a quarrel, would not have dared to use the language of open outrage. There was ever something in Mr. C's eye before which his spirit quailed and blinked like a frightened thing. It was said to be the order of nature that even the fierce crest of the wildcat cowers before the majesty of a godlike face. Mr. Clay, however, was absent, and every day of his forbearance added bitterness to the insults that were heaped on him. What could he do? Undoubtedly, that religion whose kingdom is not on this world required him to endure patiently unto the end. It is a matter of regret that he did not, but who shall censure him harshly for having in a moment of uncontrollable exasperation turned upon his pursuer and dared him to single combat? In normal speak, Randolph is yapping, calls Clay a liar. Clay is like, I heard what you said about me. No one calls me a liar and gets away with it. We're dueling. we're dueling. It's on site. So Clay sends his second to invite Randolph to this duel. Randolph is like, yeah, I'll duel you. And we're going to do it on my turf, Virginia. We're going to do it on Virginia soil, even though it's totally illegal to duel here. And Clay's like, bet. So it's the night before the duel. And Randolph, he's talking to his friend, James Hamilton. I believe Hamilton's third son. I would not Google him. He does not look very Hamilton-esque. He did not get the good end of the genetic stick, if you know what I'm saying. But he's talking to his friend, and Hamilton said, I found him calm, but in a singularly kind and confiding mood. He told me he had something on his mind to tell me. He then remarked, Hamilton, I have determined to receive without returning Clay's fire. Nothing shall induce me to harm a hair on his head. I will not make his wife a widow, nor his children orphans. Their tears would be shed over his grave, but when the sod of Virginia rests on my bosom, there is not in this wide world one individual to pay tribute upon mine. So he knew he was not liked. To translate that into normal speak, he's saying, I'm not going to try to kill Henry Clay, bro. He got a big family. Clay had 11 children. He did lose all 6 of his daughters by 1836. I'd have to check that. But yeah, tuberculosis, sickness. But yeah, he had a massive family at this point. And he lost 2 of his daughters in the same year. Not great. But Randolph, he's like, I'm not going to try to kill Clay. You know, he's got a family. I don't. People love him. People hate me. And that's just kind of sad. Yeah. So then it's the night before the duel. They even go, like, visit Clay's, like, family. And they talk to his wife. And she has no clue that, like, Clay and Randolph about to duel. It's the next day. Clay shows up. He's like, let's do this. Let's settle this beef. And Randolph, he showed up in, like, I haven't been able to find a really good picture, but what I imagine is, like, maybe an 1800s kind of pimp coat. Like, just a really big, kind of billowy kind of coat that, you know, kind of hides his frame. And he's like, it's dueling time. So they exchange fire. They both miss. We go into the second round, and Clay fires. He shoots Randolph's jacket. Good thing he was wearing that jacket. Trying to hide his frame, probably. And Randolph is like, I will not shoot you, sir. And so, duel's over. Randolph is like, you owe me a new jacket. And Clay is like, yeah, great. And when people asked Clay in some letters if he was still, you know, beefing with Randolph, Clay was like, beef with Randolph? That's a dead man walking. Are you for real? Like, why would I still have beef with that guy? Always throwing shade. That's like, I could do a whole episode about Clay throwing shade. Maybe, but that will be the next one. But I think there's also some other interpretations of the duel that I think are kind of funny. One of them comes from this later biography written by James Parton, and he describes the whole kind of Clay Randolph duel as, quote, Randolph, as the most unmanageable of members of Congress, had been for 15 years a thorn in Mr. Clay's side, and Clay's later politics had been most exasperating to Mr. Randolph, but the two men loved one another in their hearts after all. Nothing has ever exceeded the thoroughbred courtesy and tender consideration with which they set about the work of putting one another to death, and their joy was unbounded when after the second fire each discovered that the other was unharmed. If all duels could have a result, dueling would be the prettiest thing in the world. Two very different interpretations. And that's what I love about history and historiography is one man's, I can't believe they would do this. This is so crazy, is another man's. They didn't actually want to kill each other, right? We'll never know. We'll never know. So that is the Clay Randolph duel. I think it's funny. I hope you guys thought it was funny. And now I think I should end this video because if I don't, I'm just going to keep talking. But if you would like to hear me keep talking, maybe leave a comment, or if you made it this far to the video, leave horse emojis in the comments, because fun fact about almost all the guys here, especially Clay, Randolph, and Jackson, loved horses, addicted to horses. I read an academic journal article about specifically Henry Clay's contributions to the Kentucky Derby and horse culture in Kentucky. Did you know that? I should not say that without having the paper in front of me. But there's been a lot of winners of the Kentucky Derby that come specifically from the Clay kind of lineage and whatnot. So that's fun. And then there's another funny story where Randolph was like, I went into market to sell my horse, and someone offered $50 for my horse. No, I'm not gonna take $50 for my horse. This is my good horse. And he was super mad that no one wanted to buy one of his horses. And when someone was like, I'll do $50 for your horse, he was so insulted that he was like, I'm leaving. I'm out of here. My horse is worth more than $50. And he left. And I think that's pretty funny. Reminder, almost all of these guys, except John Quincy Adams and Daniel Webster, were enslavers. Yeah, that's where they got their wealth. That's how they got their influence. And, it's important to keep that in perspective. Randolph, he owned over 200 enslaved peoples. And he was one of the only few in his will who actually freed his enslaved peoples, and they became one of the first kind of black settlements in Ohio. Fun fact, Randolph and Clay were also both members of the American Colonization Society, and that was basically the let's send them back to Africa club. Yeah. So that's something. Always got to keep it in perspective. But my recommendation for this week in terms of books that I just decided to add to the end of this is, if you're looking for a good history book, Dana Ramey Berry's The Price for Their Pound of Flesh. And it kind of goes from womb to post-mortem, the enslaved experience, and it really lays a great understanding for how our kind of financial institutions came to be, our medical institutions, and it is a tough read, but I would highly recommend it. And then for pleasure reading, I would recommend The Human Target. I have my bookshelf behind here. The Human Target. This is such a fun book. I love comic books, and I want to do comic book reviews too, if y'all would be into that. But this is a really good kind of mystery, but also romance. And I'm gonna go now. Bye, ragamuffins. Woo!